Jesus' message of love and forgiveness was predicted by him in AD 33, and he said that this would reach the entire world. Think about how incredible that really is. Let's back up here. What exactly was predicted? Isaiah 42, verse 4, this is the first of the so-called servant songs, referring to this future servant, culminating in Isaiah 53. He will not be disheartened or crushed until he has established justice in the earth, and the coastlands will wait. This is going to be a process. They're going to wait for what? They're going to wait for his law. Of course, the word Torah can be used to describe the first 5 books of Moses, the Pentateuch. It can also be used to describe the entire Old Testament. Think of Psalm chapter 1. It simply just means teaching. Here, however, notice it isn't Yahweh's law, Elohim's law. It's his law, his teaching, the servant's teaching. The coastlands, these islands, are going to wait for his teaching to make it to them. Isaiah 49, the second servant song. It's too small a thing that you should be my servant to Israel and the tribes of Jacob, etc., etc. I will also make you a light of the nations so that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth. Through you, the servant, my salvation, and if you want to go deeper, my servant, my salvation, the servant is the salvation in the Hebrew. And it's going to reach to the ends of the earth. Flash forward. This is where it gets really important. Matthew 24:14. In his Olivet Discourse, we read, Jesus said, "This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come." Guys, days later, Jesus was strung up and butchered like an animal on a cross. This is the guy who's saying, my message, it's going to reach the whole world, it's going to reach all the nations, and then the end of human history will come at that point. How audacious of a claim is, how brazen is that to say, this penniless preacher who's about to be killed and butchered, what I'm saying right now, my message of love and forgiveness is going to reach the entire world. Now, some theologians say, well, that was fulfilled in the first century, because didn't Paul say in Romans 1 and Colossians chapter 1 that the gospel's been preached to all the nations under heaven or the whole world? Give me a break. What does Matthew mean by that? What does he mean by the whole world and all the nations? I'll tell you what he means. Matthew 28:19-20, make disciples of all the nations, and I am with you always, even to the end of the age. According to Matthew, in this same book, the same Greek language is used to describe all nations on earth, and the end doesn't refer to the end of the Jewish war. I know that's an intramural debate among Christians. I'm saying that is not what is being described here. Jesus is predicting that all nations on earth, all ethnic groups, are going to hear his message before the end of human history. Again, that is a bold doesn't capture it. That is an outrageous claim that every nation, not every person, but every nation on earth is going to hear about Jesus' message before the end of human history. And let's back up. When was this predicted? Was this before the fact? No, this is clearly thousands of years ago. Whether you want to late date the Gospels, I'll give you the most extreme critic who puts the Gospels in the 2nd century. Nobody does that. Let's say it's the 2nd century, which is baloney. Even if you go with that, we're still saying this prediction was millennia ago. So that doesn't answer anything. Is this prediction really unlikely, is the question. What was being predicted is clear. When it was predicted, very clear. Is it unlikely? Yes. For a number of reasons. Number one, Jesus' message of love and forgiveness spread and grew and flourished after he was dead. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get a movement going after you die? Why don't you try and do that? After you're dead, then your movement gets started. Jesus, you know Jesus of Nazareth, 3-year public ministry, not wealthy. The foxes have dens and the birds have nests. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Matthew 8. Matthew chapter 17. Go pay the temple tax. I don't have the money. We'll go find it in the mouth of a fish, Peter. I can't help you. He doesn't have money. He's not wealthy. He has a 3-year ministry, 36 months. He doesn't have any kids, no one to be the successor of his throne, so to speak. He didn't conquer any cities. What city did Jesus? None. There's no city he conquered. He didn't travel farther than 100 miles of the place of his birth. That's from here to Cincinnati. That's as far as he went. And he was almost universally abandoned at his death. All he had were a few women. John, the disciple, John 19, the disciple whom Jesus loved. That was the only one he had. And this is the guy, this is who we're going to put all of our chips into the center of the table. He's the one with the 3-year ministry and not wealthy. He's the one whose message is going to reach the entire globe. We have comparisons, Jewish comparisons. One of the best comparison would be Simon Bar Kokhba in the Bar Kokhba revolt. He tortured Christians, he killed Christians that were in Israel in the 2nd century. He was called the son of the star. This was a prophecy from the book of Numbers, where he would be the star, the scepter, to take over, Genesis chapter 49:10. And Simon Bar Kokhba claimed to be the Messiah until they caught him and killed him. Emperor Hadrian came in, 500,000 Jews were killed. The Jews at the time, they stopped calling him Simon Bar Kokhba. They started calling him Simon Bar Koziba, son of a liar. Once the so-called Messiah is killed, there's none of this stuff that he's living on in our hearts. Okay? There's none of this, maybe he's still the Messiah. No, when Messiah dies, that's it. Messianic movie is over. Dead Messiah, dead Messianic movement. So no one today is worshiping Simon Bar Kokhba or the other Messianic claimants of the 1st and 2nd century. Muhammad, the founder of Islam, when he died, people would say, well, Islam has reached many people. True, very true. Not as many as Christianity. However, billions, 1.6 billion people. However, when Muhammad died in AD 632, he had somewhere between 70 to 200,000 followers. They had militarily taken over cities. They had killed people. This is not Islamophobia or whatever. I hate how everything, if you disagree with someone, it's a psychological problem with you. You're phobic of them. I'm saying history. History is, according to the Hadith and the Quran, Muhammad had people killed, they took over cities, and they had tens of thousands of followers. Nothing like Jesus. No cities taken over, no tens of thousands of followers. Joseph Smith, the founder of the LDS Church, the Mormon Church, Latter-day Saints. He was the mayor of the city of what he called Nauvoo in Illinois. Sounds like science fiction. What's that movie with the blue aliens? Avatar. Sounds like Avatar. Navi, that's the people. All right. Nauvoo in Illinois. He was the mayor. He was the general of the militia. And he was the head of the Mormon Church. So a priest, prophet, and king, Joseph Smith. When he died, it was a shootout. He had thousands of followers. He had 30 to 70 wives. Let's go conservative. 30 wives. He had more wives than Jesus had followers at his death. Think about that. He's got kids. He's got followers. Nothing like this. And here we have Jesus of Nazareth. He's the one. No kids, no wealth, no cities conquered, no military conquest, nothing. Oh, so it grew after he died. That's hard to believe. What about the message? Is this a really good public relation message to the culture? A crucified king. So who do you worship? Zeus? What's he look like? Cut? Hera? Pretty? Who do you worship? Jesus, a mauled, crucified, butchered king. That's who you worship. Christ, crucified, married bachelor. That's what that is. It's hard for us to even grasp this because when we think about Christianity and the crucifix, we think about the necklaces and the bling and all that kind of stuff. A crucifixion victim in the first century was abhorrent. It was a horror. Josephus says that when crucifixion victims faced their fate, they were whipped so bad that, in fact, their bones were laid bare. The skin and the muscle was ripped off the back. Sometimes, he says in the Wars of the Jews, Book 2, the intestines would spill out. That's just from the whipping. They were stripped naked. This whole idea of Jesus having a little loincloth, you think that's historical? That's for our benefit. I mean, honestly, I'm happy we have that on our crucifixes and paintings and stuff because it's so horrific, I wouldn't want to see that. This, according to early sources, was the most severe punishment. As I've said earlier, in Latin, excruciate comes from the prefix ex, meaning from or out of, and cruciatus, meaning the cross. Excruciate means from the cross. Cicero, the first century BC, Roman statesman, he referred to crucifixion as a most cruel and disgusting punishment. To bind a Roman citizen is a crime. To flog him an abomination. To kill him is almost an act of murder. To crucify him is what? There is no fitting word that can possibly describe so horrible a deed. Who do you worship? Zeus? Hera? Jesus? Who is Jesus? Is he real powerful? No, he was a crucifixion victim. He was ripped to ribbons. His body was like hamburger, bloodied, and then nailed to a Roman cross. That's your God? That's who you believe in? Josephus referred to crucifixion as the most wretched of deaths. Lucian, the second century satirist, comedian, called the early Christians misguided creatures. They were trying to minister and help this man, Peregrinus, in prison, and they're bringing him food, and Lucian said Peregrinus was a fake. He wasn't a real Christian. These Christians got duped. They had these big hearts with these small heads, and they brought food to Peregrinus in prison, trying to help him out. He wasn't a real Christian. These misguided creatures, says this Greek satirist. Pliny the Younger called Christianity a, quote, depraved and excessive superstition. Tacitus called it a most mischievous superstition. Here is a piece of graffiti. It's a graffito from the second century, and it's a man, this is an artist, not a rendition, but to make it clear what the graffito looked like, they went through and they outlined what was drawn in this graffito. And it's a man holding his hand up, maybe in worship, to a person being crucified on a cross, and yet the head of the person isn't a person, it's a jackass. And what does that say in Greek right there? Maybe you don't read Greek. It says, Alexamenos worships his God. To these people at this time in Rome, to worship Christ, Jesus Christ, a crucifixion victim, was like worshiping a jackass. That's how bizarre and abhorrent this was. How does Paul put it? We believe in Christ crucified, to Jews a stumbling block, a scandalon in Greek, a scandal. And to Greeks, this is moria, moronic, foolishness. This isn't a popular message. Trypho, this is the interlocutor, the debate opponent of Justin Martyr in Israel, 2nd century. He says, whoever is crucified is said in the law to be accursed, Deuteronomy 21. So I'm very skeptical on this point. We cannot bring ourselves even to consider this. Who do you worship? Zeus, Hera, Apollos. Those are the kind of gods you'd want to worship. Who do you worship? We can't even consider this. That's how bizarre it is. Now, I know to your mind, you're like, weakness is strength, and all those bumper stickers from Christians, well, when I'm weak, then I'm strong. That makes a lot of sense to you. But in the first century, try to get into the first century mindset of a crucified God. It's abhorrent, terrible message. Yet, it grew rapidly for the first 3 centuries. So, for example, we read in our New Testament, and this is contrary to Rodney Stark's work on this. He just passed away. I'm going to speak respectfully of him. Rodney Stark is a sociologist, not a historian, who is writing about the growth of Christianity. And in his book on the growth of Christianity, he places the first century church at 1,000 people. I don't know if you realize the primary texts say that just in Jerusalem, in the first 5, 6, 7 weeks, we've got 3,000 people in the first moments of the church. Later in Acts chapter 21, James can say to Paul, you see how many thousands there are of Jews who believe. We got thousands in the primary texts. Then it moves up into Antioch, where we read in chapter 11, a large number who believed turned to the Lord. Considerable numbers were brought to the Lord. Then we move up into Pisidian Antioch. The whole city came to hear Paul teach. Acts 13. The word of the Lord was being spread through the whole region. Then we go up into Iconium and Lystra in Acts 14. A, quote, large number of people believed. They made many disciples. And then Bithynia. Of course, Peter says in right around the mid-60s AD, he's writing to the Christians in Asia and Pontus and Bithynia. Christianity had a late start here. Well, Pliny, the younger, he's writing under the reign of Trajan, 115 AD. He's writing to Trajan. He's saying, what should I do with these damn Christians? I mean, they won't recant, and they believe in this God who's crucified, and I'm thinking about just killing them. And Trajan says in his follow-up letter, he says, well, okay, kill them if they don't recant. But if they recant, then let them go. But in this discourse with him and the emperor, he says that the temples in Bithynia were once almost deserted because of Christianity. This is where Christianity had a late start, in Bithynia. Let's keep going. Philippi, you got the household of Lydia, the Philippian jailer. Read Philippians. People are coming to Christ all over Philippi, Macedonia, Thessalonica, Berea. Many of them believed, Acts 17:12. So too in Corinth. 3 letters to Corinth, maybe 4. I think there's only 3, maybe 4. 0.5 Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 5:9. In my earlier letter, Paul wrote 3 letters to the Corinthians. This was a huge burgeoning movement of these wicked, carnal Corinthian Christians. Many came to Christ there somehow. I don't know how that happened. Ephesus, Paul stayed there for 2-3 years. All who lived in Asia heard the word of the Lord. The word of the Lord was growing mightily. Why did he stay there in Ephesus? Because this was a beachhead. And this entire region. Why is it? When we read in Revelation 2 and 3 of the 7 churches, Ephesus, Laodicea, where did those churches come from? Right here. The church in Ephesus. That was a beachhead, and Paul would send missionaries out, and they reached that entire area of modern-day Turkey. Finally, in Rome, Acts chapter 28, 23, many came to Paul at his lodging in large numbers. Suetonius, writing about the period of AD 49. This is 15 years after Christ. AD 49, Suetonius says, under the Emperor Claudius, because the Jews at Rome caused continuous disturbances at the instigation of Chrestus, he, Emperor Claudius, expelled the Jews from the city. They were arguing over this guy. His name was Chrestus, and there was the Jews arguing about it in Rome. And he just said, all the Jews just get out. They kicked them all out, just kicked them all out of Rome. Even Bart Ehrman, arch critic of Christianity, says that Chrestus is obviously very close to the Latin rendering Christus. Even Ehrman will say this is referring to Christ. So, how do I put this? Jesus Christ was such a topic of conversation in Rome 15 years after his death, hundreds of miles from his death place, that the emperor of Rome needed to make a royal edict to kick out the Jews. This was causing such a problem. You don't think this was a huge movement? Tacitus, writing about the reign of Emperor Nero. He reigned until AD 67, 30 years after Jesus. AD 64 is the Great Fire in Rome. That's the context. Book 15. He says that there were a, quote, immense multitude of Christians. So within 30 years, remember Acts 2:10, Pentecost? They're coming from here, and Rome. They go all the way back to Rome. By AD 64, we have a non-Christian, Tacitus, saying there's so many Christians here, I hate these people, it's a mischievous superstition. But there's an immense multitude of them. So much so that Nero's trying to blame this fire on somebody, and he's saying, blame it on these Christians. David Barrett and Todd Johnson, in their, if you read this book, you could beat somebody to death with it. That's how big it is. These are experts in this field. They place the first century church by AD 100 at 800,000 people. I don't know if that figure is accurate. I don't know how they have that figure, in fact. What I will say is this. From everything that we just read, Christian and non-Christian sources, this was a huge movement. And this was 800,000? That's probably about right. How many churches were born? I have no idea. But everywhere we can look, we're seeing immense multitude, huge numbers. The pagan temples are emptying, so on and so forth. Here's Justin Martyr, AD 150. He writes, there is not one single race of men, whether barbarians or Greeks or whatever they may be called, nomads or vagrants or herdsmen living in tents, among whom prayers and giving of thanks are not offered through the name of the crucified Jesus. You know what he's saying there? Let me put that in modern terms. We're everywhere. We've got it into your upper class, your lower class, your bourgeois, your proletariat. We are everywhere. Tertullian, AD 200, he says, we have filled every place among you, cities, islands, fortresses, towns, marketplaces, the very camp, tribes, companies, palace, senate, forum. We have left nothing to you but your empty temples. Keep the change. You can have those, but we're everywhere else. Henry Sheldon, a Christian historian, he says Tertullian's words have a, quote, element of hyperbole. That's true. I agree with him. I don't think that the Christians were literally everywhere, right? But to speak to the remarkable rapidity and energy of Christian evangelism in the first centuries. People say, well, this is exaggeration. It's hyperbole. It's hyperbole. It's hyperbolic of what? Of a huge movement. That's what it's hyperbolic of. It's descriptive of that. The great historian Philip Schaff, he says this. He says these are exaggerations. Justin, Tertullian, they're exaggerating. However, it may be fairly asserted that about the end of the 3rd century, the name of Christ was known, revered, and persecuted in every province, in every city of the empire. In all probability, it amounted at the close of the 3rd and the beginning of the 4th century to nearly 1/10 or 1/12 of the subjects of Rome, that is, to about 10 million souls. The close of the 3rd century. A.M. Shore says, actually, this was closer to 20 million by the close of the 3rd century. I don't know where they get these figures. You read the figures, some say it's 1 in 8, 1 in 10, 1 in 12, 1 in 20. We don't have a census. It's not like anyone was counting heads. But the historians agree this was a movement that moved like wildfire. The Yale historian, Kenneth Scott Latourette, he writes, it is clear that within the first 3 centuries of its existence, and while it was still frowned upon by the state, Christianity had spread to most and possibly to all the main divisions of the Roman domains. Most estimates give proportions ranging from 1/20 to 1/8 of the population. Its rate of increase, apparently, was accelerated as the decades passed. No kidding, yeah. Certainly, it seems to have had a phenomenal growth in the 3rd century. Within the empire, it had developed what was, after the state, the strongest and most widely spread organization. By the time you get to the 3rd century, it was Rome and Christians. The Christian movement even proved itself stronger than the state. The latter had sought to exterminate Christianity, but in vain. The state of Rome, in effect, capitulated and sought to make an ally of the foe, which it hadn't succeeded in eliminating. Rome, after 3 centuries, finally said, "We quit. You win. We want you to be the state religion." Never in the history of the race has this record ever quite been equaled. Never in so short a time has any other religious faith, listen now, please, any other religious faith, or for that matter, any other set of ideas, without the aid of physical force or of social or cultural prestige, achieved so commanding a position in such an important culture. People say this: well, Christianity was spread because Constantine took over and he made it the state religion and inflated the numbers from 30 to 60 million Christians. But they were nominal Christians. They were name only. And he took over other nations and they had to be Christians. If you wanted to be in the Roman Empire, you had to be a Christian. We're not talking about that period of history. We're talking about pre-Constantine. For 3 centuries, Latourette of Yale says there's never been a movement like this. He writes, Christianity's record in the first 3 centuries is unique. It wasn't spread by the sword. It was spread under the threat and punishment of the sword. Grew after Jesus' death. That's weird. Spread an embarrassing message, and yet it was successful. That's weird. Grew rapidly under persecution for 300 years. That's weird. And continues to grow to this day. And I will bet my life, I will bet my adult life on the fact that this message will reach every nation on earth. I believe that with all my heart. Christianity in the world, in 1900, there were 500 million Christians. Today, there's 2.5 billion Christians. More people on earth believe in Jesus than any other religion on earth. This is projected to continue to increase. By 2050, again, it's going to stay commensurate with the population growth. Christianity is growing more by conversion than any other religion. Islam is growing by biological processes, having kids, big families. Christianity is growing by people coming to faith in Jesus. Christianity in Africa. In 1910, there were 9 million Christians in Africa. Today, there are 500 million Christians in Africa. This gospel of the kingdom will reach the whole world and all nations, and then the end will come. China, in 1950, there was the Cultural Revolution. All of the white, European, Anglo-American missionaries, they were kicked out. Get out of here. And the Chinese Christians had to make their religion their own. So they held to Christianity of their own volition. 1950, Mao had them all kicked out, and yet years later we see there are somewhere between 67 conservatively and 150 million Christians in China. Let me push that a little bit further. Every day in China, 30,000 people come to faith. Look at this. Here's a chart from Pew. This is not a bastion of Christian research, right? Pew Research Center says this: the Chinese Communist Party is going to be eclipsed by Christians in the next several decades. Christians are taking over China through conversion. They meet in these weird things, these house churches. Like they get together in people's houses and they read the Bible and they love each other and they study together and they just think it's better just to meet together like in face to face. And really weird practice, but that's somehow like in the last 70 years, they've gone from 1 million to somewhere between 67 and 150 million people. Here's the world map of religions. Red is Christians. Let me ask you a question. Where is the demographic center of Christianity on this map? Let me put that a different way. If I was to say, where's the center of Buddhism? You could point. Islam, you could point. Any other religion, you'd say there's a certain center place. Christianity is everywhere. It's all across the Western, Eastern hemisphere. Yeah, the 1040 window has been particularly difficult for Christians to reach. But we're saying, can you see what I'm seeing here? This gospel of the kingdom is going to reach the whole world, all nations, and then the end will come. We're seeing this happen as we speak. And it continues to grow in supernatural ways. Here's a book, Dreams and Visions by Tom Doyle. Tom Doyle is a graduate of Dallas Theological Seminary. They're cessationists. They don't believe in the continuation of the charismatic gifts. Very conservative seminary. He writes this book, Dreams and Visions. He says, more Muslims are coming to faith in Jesus today than ever before. In fact, we believe more Muslims have become followers of Jesus in the last decade than in the last 14 centuries of Islam. Read David Garrison. Read Shore. He's right. He's right. People from Islam are coming to realize the fear and the threat and the absolute horror of worrying that you're going to die and you're going to wake up in hell because you weren't righteous enough. And when they hear the message of Jesus, they realize here is complete acceptance, complete love. He gives these examples. The name is Dreams and Visions. I'll give you two. One woman is an Egyptian woman named Noor. She picked a missionary out of a crowd after having a dream about Jesus. Missionary is walking down the road in Egypt, and she comes up and says, you're the one. Yes, you. Jesus walked with me alongside a lake in my dream, and he told me how much he loves me. That love I felt in my dream is love. It was different than anything I'd ever experienced. I've never felt so much peace in my heart, she said. I didn't want to leave the dream. I didn't want him to leave. I asked Jesus, why are you visiting me? A poor Muslim mother with 8 children. In Islam, one of the features of this religion is honor shame. And so to be visited in a dream or a vision is considered to be very honoring. And doesn't that fit with Jesus? That he would hang out with the tax collectors and the prostitutes, the people that had shame. So he's visiting people in dreams. Sidebar. There's a Christian organization in the Middle East that has a billboard that says, if you've seen a man dressed in white who came to you in a dream, call this number. That's how many dreams are happening right now as we speak. All right. Why are you visiting me? She asks. And all he said was, Noor, I love you. I've given everything for you. I died for you. Ask my friend tomorrow about me. He will tell you all you need in order to understand why I visited you. Jesus did tell me your name, or did not tell me your name, but you were wearing the same clothes you have on right now, and your glasses, they're the same too. In my dream, your face, it radiated in a way that told me Jesus was indeed your friend. Number 2, a secret police officer named Muhammad. He was tailing a missionary. They put him on a missionary. We know he's a missionary. Tail him, watch him, what he does. But he kept having these dreams about Jesus. They really bothered him. And in one of the dreams that kept coming up was Jesus asked him this, Muhammad, why are you persecuting me? When he got to that part of his story, the missionary writes, he looked me in the eye and he claimed, Adele, I'm not persecuting Jesus. I'm just doing my job. He was really troubled by what Jesus had said. I asked, Muhammad, where were you when you had this dream? I was in my hotel room in Damascus. I told him that I know of someone else who had a similar dream. And he was on his way to Damascus. It wasn't a dream, it was a vision, actually. Muhammad said, did this take place recently? Doesn't know the Bible at all. Muhammad is now one of us. He's a secret follower of Jesus in the secret police. You got to read that book. I've got a write-up on it, why I think it has validity. I think those stories are true. Well, let's wrap up. What are the chances Jesus' prediction would come true? I don't like putting odds to this. 1 in a million, 1 in a billion. I'm just saying the deck is stacked against Jesus. And I'm saying the fact that here we've got the one holy book that claims to be breathed out by God, where we have at the center of that Jesus of Nazareth, whom all of the religions are trying to get. Islam wants Jesus. Buddhism wants Jesus as an avatar. Hinduism wants Jesus, one of the 330 million gods. Mormonism wants Jesus. Jehovah's Witnesses, the New Agers, everyone wants Jesus. Here we've got Jesus at the center of biblical Christianity, and it's his message that's reaching the entire globe. Whoa, I think that should bother you if you are not a believer in Jesus. That right there. Is this like a global coincidence? Is that what this is? Or are we seeing a world in which Jesus really is resurrected, still? Why is it that I've never had a dream of Muhammad appearing to me, or Vishnu, or anything like that, or Hera, Zeus? There's no dreams like that. Maybe I'm just in my own bubble, and I don't know. If you find out some dreams like that, I'd love to hear them. But here we have people totally isolated, and it's always Jesus appearing to people. Finally, if we know that not all religions can be true, we know that, right? They have mutually competing and contradictory claims. Some say there's one God. Some say there's 330 million gods. Some say God is personal. Some say he's impersonal. Some say God entered history. Some say it's impossible for him to even be able to enter into history. If that's true, that means that the religions of the world, either all of them are false or one of them is true. If we should hope that one of them is true, we should hope Christianity is true. Because here we have the one message that's reaching the entire globe, reaching more people with the love and forgiveness of God than any other.